So we're going to start with Ashlee, talking again about market-driven recycling, and just kind of go down the line. They're going to give their specific perspective, how it impacts them, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, Jennifer. So when we on the organizing committee envisioned this panel, it actually came up out of just a conversation that we were all having. We all sat around and talked about different issues that we were facing in our organizations and in our jobs in general. And as we talked about things, we batted around ideas, and we would say, well, we'd really like to do this, but then this happened, and then I heard this feedback from somebody else, and then this changed or that changed. And then somebody else said, hey, why don't we have this discussion in front of everybody? So everybody can hear this discussion, because a lot of people really aren't aware of this information. So then we started thinking that a lot of the communities in which we interact are not aware of how recycling happens behind the can, what all affects and what all goes into creating and designing a recycling program. And a lot of what goes into that is financial. A lot of it is market-based, market-driven. So we thought that we would come and talk about how the markets determine how recycling happens. You've heard Eric say this a couple of times today, that economics can drive this. Economics does drive this. Economics does drive recycling in our community. So it seems to make sense that you all know how those economics do drive it. And from my side of it, I do a lot of education and outreach, both to government entities and to school groups and everything in between. And so when I'm interacting with those organizations, I spend a lot of time just explaining how it works. And I think that that's something that our community needs to know, that there's a market value for these commodities. These are commodities. So I try to teach that to people, because I think that helps me in my goal to get them to increase recycling. There's a certain segment of the population that responds to that economic message. So I go out and try to portray the economic side of recycling. There's a market for this stuff. People don't do this for free, okay? Recycling is an industry. It's a legitimate industry that employs people, and they process commodities, and those commodities have a market value. Because those commodities have a market value, that also determines what gets collected and how often and where, and that can change depending on the market. So I think sometimes people will say, well, wait a second, I used to be able to recycle this, but now I don't have an outlet for that anymore. Well, that's because the bottom fell out of that market. So now there's no outlet for it. So we need to be able to shift. And I try to educate people on flexibility is also important in this scenario. Recycling is an industry, but it's in some cases a fledgling industry, because we always want to add more things to be recycled. People always say, well, why can't we recycle this? Why can't we recycle that? Again, there's a market component to that. So when I'm out educating people about those things, I try to emphasize those things. Recycling is an industry that employs people, and it works with commodities. And those commodities have a value. That's the message I try to give that can reinforce that recycling is market driven. So I think that's sort of the community outreach and the education side of it. I know that Steve can talk about some of the business sides of it, and then these two at the end of the table have the front line knowledge about the value of those commodities. And what they determine they want to sell, what there's a market for, then that's what I try to tell people that they can collect. So there's this big chain, and that's how it all happens. But I want Steve has a fascinating story, so I want you to hear what he has to say and things that have happened in his business, because again, that plays into the market. So here's Steve.
Fascinating story. Okay. Now we've got actually quite a few. I'm just give a little background here, and it's going to be from the health side of things, but it really does apply to all their businesses. But in particular in health, we've been able to measure some of these things. But we generate about 7,000 tons of waste every single day across America, just in healthcare. And we spend in excess of $10 billion annually to take care of that waste. And to me, when we're in trouble with healthcare and the rising healthcare costs, I'm going, this is silly. We could be doing some things to offset those very, very easily. One of the props I usually use when I go out into the community or out to our education sessions is I have 2 bags of garbage from one procedure, and this is pre-surgery. And these are big. The garbage sacks actually stand about this tall off the ground, and there's just packed full of all these wrappers and other products, and that is just total waste. And I'm going, this is absurd. We shouldn't be generating this much waste. We should be able to do something better with this. But the back side to that is we're sending that out to a landfill. We're not even trying to recycle that in most of our facilities. We're trying to turn that around. But that's one of the ugly parts of the business side of things. And it's not just in healthcare, it's in other businesses as well. And these guys can probably attest to a lot of that. A couple examples with Kimberly-Clark. We've actually got a arrangement that we're going through with them right now to take the blue wrap, the infamous blue wrap. A lot of people use that blue wrap to paint their walls, work on their cars, have a picnic because they can wrap it up in the picnic and throw it away. But they get all that stuff from the hospitals, and I guess it's repurposed to some degree, but then it just goes out into landfill, and it's a plastic product that could be recycled. And Kimberly-Clark, we've actually sat down with them. They're the manufacturer, and we've said, you created this product. Help us do something with it. Don't just force us to try to figure it out. Don't force these guys to try to figure out a market for it. You guys need to be responsible since you created it. And they've actually taken that on as a responsibility and have come up with a program. And they actually have it going in Oregon and Northern California. I'm not sure if they have it going with your programs or not across the country, but I know in those 2 states they have something going on. And we'll be talking about it soon, if not already. I don't know if they've talked to you yet or not. Yeah, and anyhow, they can take this back and they can actually start to make a decking material. They're using it in some of the manufacturing of bumpers for automobiles. How they use it, I don't know, because I haven't gotten to that point, but they can actually pelletize it and make it into a different product. Another thing we challenged them on was their exam gloves. All the hospitals use exam gloves, and they've actually created a method where they can put double the amount into a smaller box. And so they've actually cut their paper, the amount of paper that they're using almost in half. They've also created less space that it takes up, and they're able to get more on a truck that they use for transportation. So in all ways, they've actually improved in that regard. So on our side, the business side of things, we really have to take a social responsibility. And I know we were kidding about that at lunchtime, that the triple bottom line versus the double bottom line. But I think we do have a social responsibility on the business side to make sure whatever we're doing isn't creating harm in our environments or wherever that product came from. In the case of Kimberly-Clark, wherever their mills are, that they're not polluting the rivers or the air there. And so that's really a big part for us, and to get them involved in helping us to repurpose that product or find a solution for that product. And that's where these guys come in next.
Excuse me. Well, I'm Brad Pollock. I'm with Waste Management, as they said before. Waste Management is, our name is sometimes synonymous with the industry that we're in, that people associate with us. We're Waste Management. People think of us as being in the waste management industry. And right or wrong, that's just how most people see us. We see ourselves as an environmental solutions company. And so what we actually focus on is providing sustainable services to our customers. And for something to be sustainable, the way we look at it, it has to be sustainable both environmentally and economically. So when we're talking about the market and how it affects us in recycling, there's really two ways that we look at it. Again, when we're trying to focus on, is this sustainable? Can we continue to provide this service to our customers? We look at, can we process the material? Do we have the capability with the location that we're in that we can continuously and sustainably process the material? And then, is there a market for it? Can we sell it? Can we move it afterwards? So, in the sense of certain types of processing facilities, we have some very simple facilities, or it's not even a facility, it'd be a drop-off facility where people come in, they've already separated the recyclables, it comes in, we pick it up, and then it's already separated, we can bale it, and it's very simple materials. It's cardboard, it's fiber, and then we bale it, and then we have a market for it. We go up to the next level. It would be what we call, say, a dual stream processing facility, where somebody, you would have two bins at your house or maybe your business, and you would put fiber in one, and you're going to put cans and aluminum and plastic in another. And there's a certain ability at that processing facility. It can handle, on one side it can handle fiber, on the other side it can handle those containers. And then maybe at a different type of facility, we can mix everything together. So the way the market, as far as the community would affect us, is, does the community, is it sustainable for us to offer a certain level of service? On the back end of it is, can we actually sell the material? A lot of people will say, well, this should be recyclable, this should be recyclable. And usually we say, yes, we agree, it should be recyclable, but there's nobody that will buy it. We see this in C&D recycling. Concrete, large amounts of concrete, large amounts of wood. Sometimes there's no home for it, so the market can affect us there. The one thing about waste management is, we're not going to collect it. We're not going to tell you that we're going to process it if we don't already have a home for it. In some cases, there's residual material, is what we call it, that comes in with recycling, things that should not be in the recycling stream. And we're able to find homes for it that we're not getting paid for it, it's not revenue, but somebody can use it. If that end user no longer has an end use for it, then we have to then put it in the landfill. So recycling and conversion technologies, they're part of our core business, they're part of our business plan, they're part of what we offer to our customers as far as sustainable solutions for what they need done. And again, the market, it's part of the processing, what we can do with it, and what ultimately we can sell, who will buy the material.
Appreciate this opportunity, and just special thanks to the committee for putting this together, and I think they've done a great job. Such a great job. I understand I've got a late Valentine on my truck out there because I'm double parked, and I've got a parking ticket that will be framed and hopefully recycled at some point, so thank you. Larry Gibbons from Rocky Mountain Recycling, and just to give you a little bit of a sketch from our company and how we have a little bit of a different pulse on the market. We run trucks in 9 of the western states. We have plants in Denver, in Las Vegas. We have a decent-sized plant in St. George, a smaller buyback center, and then 2 very large operations here in the Salt Lake area. The reason that I bring that up is, when you look at the 9 western states that we run in, there is a different opportunity and a different avenue for every one of those states. And the things that play into it, if you were to take these states and look at disposal rates in the states that we operate in, you would see that the lower the cost it is to bury it in the hole, the lower the participation is as it goes into that market. That affects us. As you've heard all the people on the panel here talk about it, there's a lot of pressure from the community and different people to say, hey, we need to recycle this. We need to be focused. We need to make sure that there is a home, a sustainable future for it, and that it's not a matter of we take it one week, we don't take it the next, because as we all know in this room, and having a vested interest, that is what will affect recycling and the mindset of people quicker than anything. If they think, wow, it was on, it's off, these guys are just throwing it all in the landfill anyway. We have to dispel that myth, and I think that organizations like this and you know, the opportunity to do this makes a huge difference. A couple of the things that I'd point out, and as Brad and I talked earlier, he's had some experience in the East Coast. Spending as much time as I have in the waste field, I worked for Allied Waste for 13 years, and in that, as you look at the United States and you see the higher the diversion, when it costs $60, $70 a ton to throw it away. Here in the western United States, we have about a $22 a ton average, and the participation directly affects that. So we're excited to have the opportunity to tell a little bit about how we've played in that. We've been able to do a large renovation of the equipment. It'll be 3 years this July, to where we did about a $7 million renovation in one of our plants. And that was to be able to go to people like Ashlee in the county, Debbie in the city, and different people and say, okay, you know what? Now we can take this material, we can take more of it, we can process it because we've got the economies of scale to pick it up and process more through it, and be able to offer that to the residents. So I think that's, we'll end with that, and I'll hand it over to you, Jennifer.
Actually, I'm going to hand this microphone right back. But this, again, now is your opportunity to ask questions to this panel about, well, anything and everything regards to recycling. Any questions? Well, I've got questions. How much contamination do you see in processing the material when you have multiple counties, cities doing different types of programs, offering, say, we'll collect these types of commodities, and another program saying, oh, we're only going to collect these types of commodities? Do you see one that works better over the other?
The one part that we have been just absolutely faithful at is having the same message for every community, because people talk, and as they say, well, I can't put that in my can, or I can put that in my can. That's where we start to get the confusion, and that confusion adds to the contamination. And so I would say that we've seen cities as low as 3%, and we've seen them as high as 30%. And that all comes back to the education factor. There was a good quote a few years ago at the Chicago meeting, and they talked about the importance of education. We use the quote that the education of a recycling program is as important as the diesel fuel it took to pick it up, or the natural gas. You can't have one without the other. So nationally, I think the average is about 23%. I would say that you know, here in the Wasatch Front, it's probably right about that.
Similar for us. I mean, we see usually when we start up with a new community, I mean, we process the same material at our facilities. We're not going to tell one community they can do this, another community they can do that. What we will see, we do audits on trucks that come in, and we can identify routes, we can identify communities, because part of our recycling program is always going to be an education program. We don't want the residual there. It's of no value to us. It's just the trucks have to pick it up. It's more fuel to transport it. But usually when a program starts up, we'll see 3, 4, 5% residual, which is very good. And as a program matures, for whatever reason, we will see 17%, 20% residual. And it's just a constant re-education to let people know that, yes, you can put these things in, but no, we can't recycle bowling balls, we can't recycle ceramic plates, we can't recycle light bulbs at this facility. So that's a message that we have to continuously tell people.
As a business, we never contaminate anything, so.
Thank you.
Well, coming from a healthcare company, and that would be important. Yeah. I think that the problem in community education is the mixed message, and trying to dispel rumors and trying to change, you know, word of mouth because I think a lot of these programs started grassroots. A lot of them started by word of mouth. And so I think a lot of communities don't know where to turn for information. So the idea is that we provide consistent information, and that's my goal in my office, is to provide as much consistent, clear information as possible. The internet is helping a lot with that, so that a lot of people are able to look up that information online, and that's a huge help, and that cuts down on our contamination a lot. And I know with Salt Lake County Sanitation, with whom I work closely, they do have a contamination problem, but theirs is typically not the wrong type of plastic. Occasionally it's glass, but their types of contamination include those hard to recycle items that people just go, I don't know what to do with it. I'll just throw it in the recycle bin. So I think that that's, again, education goes hand in hand with the programs that are available, so that we keep in mind that we're, again, recycling commodities. We're recycling these as resources. So who best can use this resources? Who best can process this resource? And then make sure that we have proper channels for that to go through. Liz. Hi. Okay. I thought you were going to ask me about zoo poo. I was waiting for that. Okay. I think all of us in the Valley, I think Salt Lake Valley is large enough now that we can encourage these businesses to come in and start working with us to increase our, again, recycling of these commodities. And organics are a commodity as well. Eric talked about this earlier, that there's a market value for this. In some places they're paying for organics, paying for food scraps. Well, that's in Europe, and so it'd take a while to get here, but... Oh, okay, and in California. So I think that those things are coming, Liz. I wish that I had an answer for how to bring them here, but maybe one of these guys knows.
Well, when you talk about a compost facility, as we were talking earlier about the difference between the different parts of the country, in some parts of the country, all green waste, all food waste, it's banned from a landfill. It can't go into a landfill. I worked in a state where all wood, all shingles, all food waste, all of it was banned from the landfill. So the regulations were there that drove the facility. But as we were saying, with trying to drive recycling, if the cost to put it in a landfill is $20, it's hard to get someone to go to a compost facility and tip it for $23, $25, $30. So I think one of the things it would have to be regulation driven in order to keep that material out of the landfill.
Well, Ashley, the only thing I know about zoo poo is I see it when I take my kids there, so I don't have that much of a knowledge on it. I would say this, though, I do know that there are experts in that. We had an experience where we took a large chain of retailers and in doing very in-depth waste audits and trying to help them save money, make a little bit of money off their commodity. We identified that at this certain place there was quite a bit of green waste, and we put them in touch with others that were experts at it, and it was probably a 15 to 20% reduction in what was going out in their waste packer. So I think it's important to know when to bow out. That's one that we haven't chased, and we know a little bit about it, but more importantly, we know people that know a lot more about it, and we're able to direct our customers in that area.
Ashlee, tell me about your green waste and how you make money in that.
How do we make money at that? Well, I think there is a lot of work that goes into processing green waste, because I know that the composting process is natural, but it needs a lot of help. So we have to take in the material, we have to decontaminate the material, then process it, then compost it, then screen it, then sell it. So with all of those steps in mind, it is difficult to make money at it. And that does merit some discussion. But I think that if the processes are refined and there's a combination of materials in there, we can increase the amount of money that we do make on it. But right now, our composting process is a break-even process. We break even.
So are you evaluating the diversion from landfill? Are you giving that a cost benefit?
No. That's pretty difficult to quantify. We've in the past been asked to quantify the value of this diversion in terms of landfill space. We just don't have a really solid number on that. So I really hesitate to give out a number because I don't have a clear sense. I mean, I think that there's a little bit of a social value in making our landfill last as long as possible, because again, we will need a landfill long term. Even if we embark on a zero waste mission, we will still need a landfill long term. So the value in that is more of a social one and less of a quantifiable one. Quality of life kinds of things. That makes sense? Okay. John? Yep, we do. And that is a significant volume reduction. Right, and if we take the tons brought in, and then there is a mathematical formula to figure out the tons, and that equals so many cubic yards, and then that number of yards equals this many days, or weeks, or months, or years that we can add, and yes, we can add that, and that is quantifiable. In some cases, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Anybody know anything on legislation? Larry, any ideas?
I think the important side of the legislation is that we inform the people that are trying to push it, because sometimes they can have a skewed idea on it, and if there's not a market to take that, whatever their legislation was and whatever their idea was, if there's not a market to do it, then it just adds to the confusion. A classic example right now is in California. They're passing some legislation on mandatory carpet recycling. That's great because that's going to divert a lot from the landfill. But if the markets can't handle it, we're defeating the purpose, and it's going to cost the people of California a lot more money. They're going to have to pay deposits similar to a CRV, but there's not going to be an avenue to recycle it. So I think that the legislation, they have to be informed by the people that really know what's going on and let them know, yes, there is a market, yes, that is a good idea to push that bill, or what's the long-term goal here? Can we really sustain it? Yeah, that's a good question. It's a tough one because in a perfect world, we'd have recycling for every household all up and down the state. You look at the state of Utah, and the majority of the population is within a 70-mile stretch along the Wasatch Front. the rural communities, they need it just as bad as people in downtown Ogden, Salt Lake, or Provo. But as we talked about earlier, the economics, if it's not there, they're not willing to pay to take it out there, and they don't have a curbside program because they don't have curbs, for one, but number two, it is super hard to go out and pick that up. So in baby steps, I think you can put a program together, and you can help it. I think it's similar to the seatbelt law. And when the seatbelt law got pushed into everybody, there were a lot of people that were upset about it, but what does it mean to us today? Well, there's a lot of lives saved. Same thing with mandatory programs. It means a lot of diversion from the landfill and saving that space for tomorrow.
I mean, I think that we need to be careful on pushing too much legislation that mandates recycling. We've seen pushback in other parts of the country when things are pushed too hard. Too many people don't want to be told what they have to do and what they don't want to do. I think that the market will drive it eventually, and that just the people's general attitude is going to cause the recycling to happen. But we just need to be careful with forcing legislation that's going to make somebody do it, particularly if the market's not really there. I mean, the carpet is a great example. We get asked all the time about recycling carpet, and it's very difficult to recycle carpet. Very difficult. It has to be of a certain size, and it has to be of a certain type, and it can't be contaminated. You can't. The pad is separate from the carpet. But if they're going to force people to recycle carpet, then there's going to be warehouses full of carpet that is not going to have a home. So.
In terms of any legislation that has ever been brought up recently, we had some electronics legislation last legislative session, not this current one, and then the previous legislative session. And both of those electronics bills were designed as producer responsibility bills. And they would have, again, speaking to information, informing our legislators, those bills would have meant no additional cost to consumers, and that electronics could have been recycled with no additional cost or hardship on consumers. And it actually would have just shifted to the producer. And the producers are already collecting money to recycle these things. So they would have just been able to fulfill their recycling portion here in Utah. And that had a hard time getting through as far as it did, and eventually was shot down in committee. So it didn't even make it to the floor. There have been other suggestions. A bottle bill was suggested, I think 4 years ago. Was that 4? Yeah, at least 4 years ago. There was a bottle bill proposed by the Utah State Parks, I think, put it out there originally, and they wanted to increase recycling, particularly in their state parks. They don't want a lot of plastic bottles and aluminum cans littering the park. They thought that a deposit would help curb some of that pollution, litter, and that didn't go anywhere either. So in the past, the 3 times that I know of legislation that was introduced, it didn't get anywhere. So we're still trying to figure out the best way to approach our legislature, and haven't figured that out yet. But again, it has to make sense. It has to make economic sense, and it has to actually do some good. We can't recycle at all costs. So if we recycle something but we generate more waste in the process, then it's really not worth it. If we're recycling something but we're paying just as much money to transport it or store it, then it's really not worth it. So again, there has to be a lot of thought that goes into these things. We have the DEQ. DEQ on the spot.
you want to talk about what you're trying to do as far as collecting numbers?
Sure. And just to comment on that, people are doing things on the local level, and there is nothing officially going on the state level currently. One of the things I'm trying to do in my current position is gather data as to what is being recycled out there in the state and where that material is going to. So we're in the very beginning stages of that. That's a very good question. An immediate reason for that is so the state can report that to EPA Region 8, which would then encourage further markets for this material. So one very important reason is to encourage markets for the material, which would then send the message back downstream and possibly increase recycling on the local level further and provide a steady stream of material.
I'm not familiar with the article.
Is it similar to the one that was in Popular Mechanics about?
It was originally published in the New York Times. The title was something like "Recycling is Garbage." It was an op-ed piece looking at recycling programs in New York City, and the New York Times came out very strongly that it wasn't worth it. But yet, there are for-profit businesses out there doing well, feeding families, pursuing this business. I was curious if you had perspective.
I think the first part I would say on that is that I remember hearing something about it, and I've read a couple of them. The one that this gentleman cited from '92, I don't remember that specific one, but there are a lot out there, and I think for every negative one, there's probably 10 positive ones. The EPA reports a statistic that from 1995 to 2005, there was 9,000 plus communities that started a curbside program, and I think that speaks to the legitimacy of these, that they wouldn't be starting them if it didn't make sense. And the technology is part of what has increased that participation, because a plant that used to do 5 tons an hour can do 25 tons an hour with the modern technology. But the part that really starts to move that needle is that trucks that used to cost $175,000 now cost $300,000 for a fully loaded one. And for us, of having all of this vested interest in this industry, there's a great quote, and that is that these programs will be free when the trucks are free, the gas is free, and everything else. The plants are free. They're not. They cost a lot of money. And so as technology improves, there's that break-even point, and I think you get what you've seen with these thousands of communities in a 10-year span starting up.
The only thing I would add is what I said before, is that when we look at providing services to a community or to anyone, it has to be sustainable, and that's not only environmentally, that's also economically. So there are, I'm sure, examples out there where some recycler or somebody came in and said, I'm going to do this for you and it's going to be free, or it's only going to cost this. I mean, I actually probably run across one of these once a month or once a week, and I kind of look at some of these examples and say, if they can do it, I'll be interested to see it. So that could have been what the article was based on, that there are examples where recycling programs have failed, but I would say that it's failed not because recycling cannot be economically viable and it doesn't work. It's because just that one particular example, somebody didn't look at the problem the right way.
I was just going to say, we have limited resources out there, and at some point, whatever we're using won't be cheap any longer. As I indicated earlier, in healthcare, we're delivering about 7,000 tons a day to those landfills. Well, you can only keep doing that for so long before they're filled, and we have to build others, and they're not going to be cheap. They're going to be very expensive. And so the burning platform is there. And maybe it doesn't make sense today, but as a business, I have to be looking beyond today. I have to look to tomorrow and 5 years, 10 years out. And I've got to start thinking about what those impacts could possibly be. And I believe the recycling equation starts to become much better as far as a business decision. The lean side of it really starts to pop its head out and say, we better be doing this and better be finding some solutions, and not just forcing on these guys, but working with our manufacturers, as I indicated earlier. So.
Do you guys want to talk about that? Well, I can only speak for Salt Lake County, and that's Salt Lake County encompasses several cities, and each one of those cities is free to make their own contracts. So, again, this is part of the economics of it. They're free to make their own contracts, and so they make contracts with haulers, and those haulers interact with one of these guys most likely for recycling. So and then they so I guess it's really kind of there are a couple of groups that come together to kind of make it all happen, and they have to make it happen in an economic sense. So the haulers will make a contract with the city as well as the recycling facility that makes sense for them. It has to be cost effective for them. And again, each city does their own thing. I don't know at what point. There are several small haulers out there too. So they can do there are mom and pop haulers out there. And the haulers are the linchpin on that community size kind of thing. They'll go out to bid for communities that are larger if that's what makes economic sense to them. But then there are smaller haulers that will come out, the mom and pop organizations that will come out for smaller communities, and they can do it sometimes at a lower cost. So I think it's really kind of situational. But these guys would probably know more about that. Waste would know.
Do you have a comment or a question?
Gina. Oh, okay. Sorry, Gina.
The question was trying to understand from a business perspective the difference between recycling at a community level versus recycling at an individual business level, a large industrial waste producer or whatever.
So I mean, we don't really have a cookie cutter method that we can say it's X, Y, and Z. This is how we do it. I mean, all of our customers are different, and we first want to understand the needs of the customers, whether that's a community or whether that is just an individual business. So we look at a variety of things. First, we want to solve their problem. We want to give them the solution that they're looking for, and then we try to find a way that it's economical and it's sustainable and environmentally proper for both them and for us. So there's just a variety of ways that we can look at it. In some cases, we are the collection company as well, so we'll collect it and we'll structure it based on not only the processing and the marketing of the material, but also on the collection, the service we're providing there. In some cases, we're working with third-party companies that are actually doing the collection. In some cases, we're just providing a drop-off facility. We're providing the containers in a certain part of the community that we then come collect on a periodic basis. So but again, if it's going to be sustainable, it has to be sustainable environmentally and economically. So there's just a variety of ways that that we look at it.
Ditto on that. It's a matter of, as we go out and we haul, it's different from every plant. Whatever they're manufacturing, they're going to produce a byproduct. Some of it's going to be high plastic, some of it's going to be high in cardboard, paper. So every one of them is different. I think you have to just look at those economics, look at the historical prices of what it's been, what it's at today, what we think it could be in the future, and price it based off of that, and tie some of the pricing to to the market. And as it gets good, it's better for everybody, and as it gets down, we all share in that risk.
Do you want? John has a question. Mr. Sassine, did you have a question? You're moving closer? Okay. What? One last question. Be all right? Are the recycling companies running at 100% capacity now here in Utah?
As for Rocky Mountain Recycling, no. We've got plenty of room, and we're here for the future to be able to watch these programs grow and develop, and we can do a lot more.
That's the same for waste management. No, we're not at capacity, and we're prepared to grow to continue to meet the needs of the community and